intelligence. Sit next to this alpha.
Yeah, do the roll call.
Semo, man.
Oh, yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is an agenda today.
Now we'll have the roll call.
That's the only thing I the general meeting, general business.
Here.
Commissioner Barfield.
Here.
Commissioner Merritt.
Present.
Commissioner Villavicea.
Yeah.
Commissioner Dozier.
Here.
Commissioner Maddow. Commissioner Minor.
Here.
Commissioner Matlow.
Here.
Commissioner Richardson.
Here.
Commissioner Williams Cox. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda modifications. Rick?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to pull agenda item 4B from the consent.
Okay. Any other modifications? All in favor of the, is there a motion to approve?
Aye.
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 All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Yep.
You
I
bet.
think we're doing it the
Do we have any public comment?
We've actually done any
No cards? Okay, is there a motion on consent? What's left of it?
Move consent. Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Greg?
4B. 4B.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know this is a yearly thing for the CRTPA. We went through it last year with when I just had joined the board here. But just for the sake of everybody here in the audience, as well as in the meeting minutes, just wanted to point out that the proposed recommendations for the fatality levels, number of fatalities per 100 million VMT, et cetera, those numbers are not acceptable. The proposed numbers, which I support and I'll vote for example, 58 fatalities as a safety performance measure for 2020 is not an acceptable number. I know that no one here at the table believes that it is. 57 is not acceptable. 1 fatality is not acceptable. But with the FHWA recommending that we do not go to the Vision Zero number, it's basically a way for us to help track how our progress is going for continuous improvement. So I just want to point that out to anybody here that may see this and think that the CRTPA is basically voting to say that 58 fatalities is acceptable. It is not. But just want to point that out.
I second that.
Was that a motion to approve?
That is a motion to approve the agenda item.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? You got somebody a card?
No, this is for item
Okay.
6.
All right. Greg?
Here. Mr. Chairman, actually, our first item up is the Town of Havana Main Street assessment. Mr. Burke was the project manager on that, so I'm going to have him introduce it and talk a little bit about it, and we have a presentation for you all as well.
Good afternoon, members. Beginning in late 2018, about a quarter mile of US 27 in downtown Havana was studied for the feasibility of potentially reducing lanes through that roadway in the heart of downtown Havana. Who we have here today to actually discuss the findings of this study is Beverly Davis with RSNH.
Good afternoon, y'all.
Hey, Beverly.
So we were looking at US 27 Main Street, and just a little bit of background about the corridor. It is a 4-lane facility that goes through Havana. It is undivided. It transitions from 4-lane with a grass median both north of downtown and south of downtown. And our analysis area was between 5th Avenue and 9th Avenue. The cross-section of the facility is 45 feet wide. The sidewalks are approximately 4 feet wide, and the buildings are located directly adjacent to the sidewalks. There are pedestrian crosswalks that are included in the 2 signalized intersections, which is at 9th Avenue and 7th Avenue. So the goals of the study was to improve the pedestrian experience, manage traffic efficiently without having any adverse impacts on the current level of service, improve the corridor aesthetics, and then supporting the overall goals of the downtown for their redevelopment, revitalization of that area. So the first step in the study was to collect data. We did collect traffic data over a 3-day period, which was a Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And we particularly chose that so we could capture people coming into downtown for shopping or restaurants on that Friday and Saturday. The count locations were again at 5th Avenue and at 9th Avenue, and we collected traffic counts, vehicle classification to determine the number of trucks, the speed of the traffic moving through downtown, and then the turning movements that occurred at 7th Avenue. So the average annual daily traffic, AADT, at 5th Avenue was almost 11,000, and that's in both directions. At 9th Avenue, it was about 11,500. At 5th Avenue, it was 14.7% trucks, and at 9th, 14.3% trucks. In looking at the speed, this is both northbound and southbound. The posted speed limit is 30 miles an hour. At 5th Avenue, the traffic was traveling at 37 miles an hour, and at 9th at 32 miles an hour. So we also looked at the turning movements at 7th Avenue. The highest day for those movements did occur on Thursday. We looked at 12-hour counts, the highest AM, which occurred from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., and then the highest PM, which was from 4:45 to 5:45. And the little red boxes will help you see where the highest turning movements occurred. In the 12-hour period, it was traffic traveling south, making a right-hand turn, onto 7th, or coming eastbound, making a left-hand turn onto Main Street. The highest AM hour, it was making the left-hand turn, westbound traffic to go south on Main Street. And then the highest PM hour mirrored those that occurred during the 12-hour period. We also wanted to look at if we narrowed down the travel lanes, made it a 2-lane roadway with on-street parking, what would that do to the traffic operations? So we did use the highest traffic volumes. 2 lanes with no left turn lane at 7th Avenue. It's currently operating at a level of service B. So we grew the traffic at 1% for the horizon year. That's an annual growth rate to see what would happen. It still operated at a level of service B, as well as with a 2% growth rate. It still operated at a level of service B. So we just upped the growth rate until we hit level of service D, approaching E, and that was a 4.8% growth rate. We also did a crash analysis. We took the 5-year period. There were 39 total crashes within the study area. The vast majority of those occurred at 9th Avenue or near 9th Avenue, and the primary cause noted on the accident reports was distracted driving. Texting. There were also some additional considerations to consider, and that was the Regional Planning Council's regional evacuation study that does designate US 27 as an evacuation route. We did have some stakeholder coordination with the town of Havana as well as with FDOT District 3 to get their input on the recommendations. And we developed 4 alternatives that were structured to meet the needs of the town, minimize any adverse impacts on the traffic moving through the area, and we wanted to make sure that the configuration occurred within that existing pavement, that 45 feet. So the first alternative was 2 12-foot lanes with on-street parallel parking, which provided area for buffer area. Alternative 2 were 2 11-foot lanes in each direction with on-street parallel parking that provided even more room for wider sidewalks or planting strips or a buffer area. The third alternative was looking at 2 lanes, 12-foot in each direction, with no on-street parking, which really provided, and I guess I should back up and say there is currently no on-street parking on the facility. That really provided the ability for even wider sidewalks, landscaping, planting strips to improve the aesthetics. And then alternative 4 was 3 12-foot lanes, 2 northbound, 1 southbound, no on-street parking, and that still provided some additional ability to put in wider sidewalks or planting strips and some type of landscaping. So our recommended alternative was alternative 4 with the 3 lanes. That maintains the northbound capacity if needed in case of an emergency or evacuation situation. It does meet the goals for an improved pedestrian environment, and it does provide the ability to improve the aesthetics of the corridor with planning areas. And there really is no adverse impacts on traffic operations. So that was the recommended alternative. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions y'all may have.
Dr. V?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Right at this moment, I would imagine that maybe the executive director and the city of Havana probably have had a sidebar one-on-one conversation, and in the audience is the city manager for the township of Havana as well as the mayor pro tem. I don't know if they would like to, at this point, come and give their input as to these alternatives and how they see these impacting the lifestyle in Havana, and if the executive director had already met with them, if he can also give us an update on what the conversation between CROTPA, he being the representative, and the city of Havana was with regards to this item. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Let's go ahead and let our speaker, who happens to be Brad Johnson.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I want to thank you for allowing us to be here today, as well as my Mayor Pro Tem from Havana. Really just comments of gratitude. Being new to the town of Havana as their town manager, you quickly try to get apprised of all that's happening. So I appreciate each of you in your respective places for continuing to think about Havana at times like this, as far as making sure that transportation and mobility is top of mind regionally. The thing that was not spoken about with RSH, and you did a wonderful job, but I want you to know Mr. Slay and his team came out and we talked about that, which is not only the transportation and the mobility and pedestrian friendly component, but also the emergency management and evacuation component. So as we begin to talk about what we want the area looks like as far as the amount of lanes or the amount of pedestrian traffic, Havana is unique because we do get not only people that walk the downtown areas, but we also get people who ride bicycles down there, and even we are a golf cart community. So all of these things we want to continue to be top of mind as we talk about what we want the area to look like, what we want it to feel like, and we know you all are doing that. And so I just wanted to express gratitude to Mr. Slay and his team for thinking of Havana and even coming out our way and sitting down with us. That meant a lot. So thank you.
Thank you. Betsy?
Yes, thank you. I do like the option of no on-street parking. I think that that's going to enhance the way that Havana's going to look tremendously. I didn't see anything about bicycle shoulders and how you're going to handle that. And also, what are you going to do about your large trucks coming through? Are they going to be routed around?
Well, currently the trucks do go through, and they are required, or there's signs posted for the trucks to use the left-hand lane to get them away from the sidewalk pedestrian area, and that would continue on the northbound. On the southbound, with the implementation of that wider sidewalk with a buffer area and landscape, it does provide a better pedestrian feel, if you will, environment, even with the trucks coming through. So we did not look at a truck bypass through there.
Okay.
And then bicycles, there's so many adjacent corridors, parallel corridors that could provide the access for the cyclists rather than having them on 27 with that constrained right-of-way, and then the trucks and trying to improve the pedestrian environment.
So there's not going to be room for bike shoulders in that area, correct?
Correct.
I
Okay.
think you would want it with all those big trucks coming through.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
And,
Commissioner, I was going to say, if you just reference the picture there, you
Yeah,
can see
I
there's
saw it.
virtually no room for a shoulder.
Right.
Yeah. So on the sidewalks, how much wider are you going to make those?
So with the three-lane configuration, that leaves 36 feet for the travel lanes. It's 45, so that's 9 additional feet
9.
to widen
And how
on
fa-
each side.
And how wide is that, 3?
That's,
Maybe.
It's about 3.
it's about 3 to 4.
I believe that there's quite a few people that in the community of Leon and Tallahassee went to Greensboro, South Carolina.
Greenville.
And Greenville, thank you. And they have an amazing downtown, small little area. I would encourage you to take a look at that, because Havana is really a sweet little town, and I think that having some type of, I don't know if you call that a road diet, but enhancements like that would just really, really help out.
Right, and I don't know if you're familiar with Greenville before their downtown
No.
got redeveloped. It's absolutely amazing, the transformation.
So those are my recommendations for you. And on those cyclists, just, good signs, so you'll know where to go.
Curtis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just interested to find out what the city manager or mayor pro tem's position is on the various options that have been offered. Have you all had a chance to take a look at those options? And yes, could you address that for us?
So I will tell you, I've had the opportunity to look at 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's been my goal to kind of work with the council on it. You imagine I'm in my first month and a half of this.
Okay.
So they have not been able to give me a unified stance on that. I don't want to jump the gun on it, but I have had an opportunity to look at these alternatives and to talk with staff. But this is something that we've got to kind of get in front of them. So you all are talking about this now, whereas they need to kind of be talking about this as well.
Okay.
But I do know that this is we're kind of in the beginning stages even of all of this from a long-range perspective. So I think we've got a little time to continue to correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, I would just suggest that this be a bottom-up rather than a top-down. And so we should give them an opportunity to study these 4 alternatives and determine what's best for the city of Havana, and then maybe give us a recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Councilman.
Okay.
Kristen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Richardson, my questions were right along the same, and I was wondering what your recommendation was, Mr. Johnson, and congratulations. You guys have a good city manager. What we're being asked to approve today, Greg, does that leave the opportunity for the city to look a little bit more into these options, yes?
Yeah, and it was a timing issue. We'd worked quite a bit with the previous town manager before, and then Brad came along, like I said, about 6 weeks ago, so we had lost some time in there, but we were continuing to move this forward based on the conversations we'd had with the previous town manager.
So if we approve the item as it's structured today, we still have the opportunity to refine that in the future, or do you need any particulars in a motion that we give Mr. City Manager the opportunity to talk about this with his board?
I believe we can still work with them. I mean, the biggest thing is Beverly touched on her presentation, the fact that it is a hurricane route, and the department was definitely not interested in going from 4 lanes down to 2.
Okay.
And we're even still, the alternative 4 is probably going to require some work working with the department to kind of convince them of that as well, because that's still, that's losing a bit of capacity. But as we've shown in the study, we think it can function as it should and provide those enhancements to the pedestrian part of it anyway.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, and I'm supportive of the item, but just wanted to make sure that we had that opportunity. The last thing I'll say, just on behalf of the Planning Council and Chris, there is a bill moving through right now to fund an updated study of the evacuation routes. We've needed that for a long time, and so keep your fingers crossed that the state will approve that funding, and working with all of our planning councils around the state to conduct that study, which will help us in our region particularly. Thanks.
B?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. In light of the conversation at this point, if it's appropriate, I am going to move that we approve the item as currently presented.
Second. Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great.
All right. Chairman, item 6B, continuing along, updating of our 2045 regional mobility plan. We'll turn it over to Jack, do a brief introduction, and then have our consultant take it from there.
I want to do it.
Commissioners, I'll talk about the first part of the discussion, and then I'll turn it over to Kate from Kimley Horn. In terms of the schedule for the project in January, we brought you some information about the timeline and some of the other project components, the public involvement, and how we're going to move forward to meet this June deadline for a cost feasible plan. So we keep moving forward, and in that time, we were able to get the model, the transportation model from the consultant, took a look at that, and we also had some more public engagement with some of the jurisdictions. We met with Havana and Midway, and we have other meetings set up for the latter part of this month for other parts of Gadsden County, and continue to work for meetings with Wakulla County and Jefferson County municipalities. So today what we're going to be talking about is the needs plan, the evaluation and prioritization process, the discussion about prioritization and some upcoming milestones, and we'll give you an update as to, we had a long discussion last time about the MetroQuest survey, and we'll give you a quick update on that as well. So starting off with the needs plan. The needs plan is one of these things, it's not a requirement, but it's kind of the first step in every long-range plan in terms of project identification. We look at previous projects, we look at congestion management projects, we look at what has been submitted through the public involvement component, and we also take a look at the opportunities that are out there from safety analysis. And typically, the needs plan is a rather large list of projects, and that's all it is. There's nothing more attached to it. We don't do the costs. We don't evaluate these at this point. We're just gathering projects. I want to say last time when we did this in 2040, there were somewhere in the range of 1,200 projects, and they range from sidewalks to bike paths to intersections. I mean, it's just all over, literally all over the map. So what we end up doing is taking all these collectively and putting them in the needs plan for identification. So if you remember from last meeting in January, we showed you a graphic from the survey that had 450. There were numbers all over the map. There were 4 numbers. Those numbers represented a number of projects that had been indicated through the survey. All of those projects will be introduced into it. Now, there may be some duplicate projects in there with what we've already got, but all of those projects will be rolled into this as well. So we're looking at a pretty large number of projects. But what we want to do is take all those projects as the first step towards moving towards that cost feasible plan in June. And we'll be bringing that back to you in March. We're still working on the survey, which will be open till the end of February. And we're still collecting data. And again, through the jurisdictional meetings that we've got, we've also been collecting projects as well. So when we take that needs plan, what we want to do is introduce a process for evaluating the projects. It's a 2-step process, and the evaluation criteria and then the prioritization criteria. The evaluation criteria is one that has an initial cut of the projects, looking at how they meet certain goals and certain criteria. And Kate will be going over that in just a few minutes. But in general terms, what you're wanting to do is kind of weed out some of the projects that don't meet some standards, like if there's a project that's a set-alone project in the middle of nowhere, if there's a project that isn't making a connection to an existing project or minimally does, or if there's one that's planned for out there. So there's a number of criteria that'll be that first cut over how the project vies against its utility and how viable that project is. The second the second set of criteria is the prioritization criteria, which will take all those projects from step 1 through the evaluation criteria and introduce a more detailed analysis of the project using, for example, level of service, future level of service, existing level of service, how well that projects meet environmental standards and accessibility standards. And all of those criteria will have a certain weight attached to them. And we'll be going over that again in March to you and presenting the detail about the weighting of the criteria in March. What we want to do today is just introduce the criteria to you, and then if you have any questions or comments about the criteria, we'll be more than happy to address those at that time. This is flexible. We do have some criteria that are mode specific, so we want to make sure that we're hitting on all the modes that we've got out there. Some of the projects are probably not mode specific and just an overall general kind of project in terms of like an intersection project that benefits a whole multitude of transportation modes. So we'll be addressing those as well. And we will have projects in here that will be financially constrained. And so when we take these criteria, the next step is to identify those and put those into tiers, which is a requirement by the FHWA and DOT. And what we do is we take a look at we will establish a tier 1, a tier 2, and a tier 3 with a 5-year period, another 5-year period, and then a 10-year period taking it out to 2045. And as those tiers move along, what we want to do is similar to the Bike and Ped Master Plan, identify a tier of projects. And then that way, what we can do is as the funding becomes available and depending on the kind of funding, we can pick and choose projects that best meet that funding level and making sure that we're identifying these projects. So if there's an opportunity to partnership with some of our other transportation partners, we will be able to move forward with those. So we will prioritize them, but we want to keep it flexible so that we have the opportunity to mix and match funds as the projects move along. I mean, again, and this is a slow process, so it's not like it's going to come out of nowhere. The money doesn't just show up. I mean, we have a general idea what the revenues are and what kind of money's coming in. So we won't show up and have an emergency meeting because it's a project that came out of nowhere. We know where they are and we know the money's at. So it's just a matter of matching those together. So all of this is going to occur, and we'll be introducing some of these things in just a few minutes with the criteria, and then in March with the needs plan and the weighting of the criteria and the application of the criteria to the projects that went through that prioritization process. Did I talk too fast?
No.
Everybody got it? Yep. Good job. If you have any questions, please ask. We don't want to have any confusion going into this next step.
There will be a test at the end of the we'll make sure.
Cheat sheet.
Great, thanks, Jack. So we're just going to go through a little bit of the details that Jack just kind of laid out, starting with the step 1 of the process, which is the evaluation criteria. So we have 4 components of this criteria. The first 2, project phase is complete and a part of an adopted plan. If a project we get has either of those complete, it will move forward into the prioritization process. If a project already has a phase that's been completed or is a part of adopted plan, we have to trust that that project has been vetted for environmental and social impacts and that it satisfied it, and there really are no major issues with that project.
Like Crawfordville Highway.
Sure. With natural environment and social environment, if a project satisfies either or both of those criteria, but it maybe doesn't have a phase complete or isn't a part of adopted plan, it will still move on into the prioritization process. So really, the evaluation criteria is looking at the extremes of a project and if there's a very big red flag that we shouldn't put it in prioritization. And everything we're looking at today right now is for roadway projects as well. So now we'll go through some of the prioritization criteria. A lot of these are very similar to what we had during the 2040 Regional Mobility Plan. The Growth Center Economic Development Area, universal accessibility. Universal accessibility is also captured in our transit and bicycle pedestrian criteria, which you'll see on the next slide. For existing congestion reduction and future congestion reduction, that is actually going to replace efficiency and travel time reduction, which was in the previous regional mobility plan. This allows us to use that new district-wide travel demand model to help us understand future and current congestion levels. And by replacing the criteria of what we had last time with this new travel demand model, we're allowing to maintain that multimodal balance for this process, as well as not become over-dependent on congestion metrics. So all the criteria you see on this page is from the last regional mobility plan. Safety is obviously a huge part of the criteria. I'm looking at evacuation drought, freight priority, and as I stated earlier, the supportive of transit priorities and accessibility, as well as bicycle and pedestrian mobility and accessibility, really help with that universal accessibility, making that a very high-ranking part of this prioritization criteria. So on this slide is new roadway prioritization criteria. So we have added resilience and travel and tourism, which reflect new federally required planning focus areas. And those are also 2 new goals, a part of this regional mobility plan, which were presented to you last month. The addition of the transportation technology is really to reflect the desire to adapt to changes in our transportation technology and anticipate the inclusion of those in our future planning. Unfortunately for this area, recently we have had a new ITS master plan, so we'll be able to use some of the data that was collected for that in this RMP process. And this is what you see on this slide is a tiebreaker prioritization criteria. So though funding commitments and identified gateways are important in some instances, they're not as universally applicable to our region. So these are going to be used on projects that maybe come out very close to one another, and we want to take a look at this, but these will not be used unless a tiebreaker is needed, because we don't want it to add on to different scoring levels. So for the bicycle and pedestrian prioritization, we're going to draw from the prioritization criteria that was used for the 2019 update to the Tallahassee-Leon County Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan. That project actually used evaluation criteria that was vetted by the CRDPA during the 2040 RMP, so those prioritization criteria were used in the development of that master plan. Some of it's going to be adjusted to ensure that the criteria is representative of our urban, suburban, and rural areas within our region. And some of our upcoming milestones. So as Jack said, we've already been out to 2 different municipalities, Havana and Midway. We have 4 more meetings scheduled next week. When it comes to the survey, we have 333 surveys completed. So we wanted to really reach that 300 threshold. And that is continuing out through the rest of the month of February. In March, we will bring you the needs plan and a draft prioritized projects. April will revise. Yes.
Looks like all your meetings are in Gaston County, is that right?
As of scheduled, yes. But
Stakeholder.
They are going to McCullough, obviously, in Jefferson.
yes, we just haven't scheduled those.
We're going to skip Jefferson and Waukegan.
Everybody's on.
Yes, those are just the ones that we've been able to schedule so far.
Yes. In April, we will revise the prioritized projects and start to bring you some of the financial pieces of this regional mobility plan, as well as the cost feasible plan, bringing you some of those assumptions and the layout for that project. In May, we will have the draft cost feasible plan, as well as we will have a second round of public workshops. Now, that being said, between February and May, we are looking at different larger community events within the 4-county region to attend. We did go to the Winterfest that was held here in December, and that was very successful to disseminate information to the public about this long-range transportation process, as well as we got a lot of participants for the survey. So the idea is to find a few more of those that we can go to over the next couple months, just to gather some input and make sure that the public is being engaged as much as possible for this process. And then in June, we will bring you the cost feasible plan for adoption and document this regional mobility plan for 2045. So with that, I am more than happy to answer any questions.
Kristen? What?
Great.
Okay.
But you don't have to go to
Okay.
You don't have a question?
It's only because you called me out, Mr. Chair.
All right, Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to save this until the end of the agenda, but I guess I could ask it now if it's appropriate. I am still very concerned about the priority of the widening of Orange Avenue because I think a lot of the development that's occurring east of Orange Avenue from Monroe, South Monroe and South Adams, the new TMH standalone emergency facility, the new office complex that has come online, the apartments, and others, I believe, and I don't have any statistical data to substantiate this, but what I do have is observations, weekdays and weekends, of the increasing amount of traffic on the section of Orange Avenue from Spring Hill Road east to South Adams, South Monroe. And so this is something I've been advocating for years, and it's becoming increasingly an issue. I live off of that segment with all, so that everyone knows where I'm coming from. But there's also a school in that area. There's commercial development along that segment. And so I think it's important for us to prioritize that segment of Orange Avenue. And I don't know if that will happen during this process, but I would certainly like for us to consider that as we move forward.
This is the time to do it.
Okay.
Good, Mr. Chairman. And that would be, Mr. Richard, that would be part of this process as well as our annual priorities list. I think right now
Okay.
Orange Avenue is about fifth or sixth on the list, but keep in mind, in terms of where it's at in the process, it's probably the one that's further behind. Crawford Highway is ready for construction. We have design money now on Orange Avenue, so it is moving forward.
Okay.
So I think at not a pace that any of us are particularly happy with.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Nick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Chair, I think it's time that we get real serious about transit. I was having a conversation today with Pam Hall, and we were talking extensively about the growth patterns of just Leon County in general and how things may go in the future, let's say 10 to 15 to 20 years out. I think transit will be an important part of affordability when it comes to when and where people are able to live. I think we have a mobility plan or a transportation plan that covers a lot of the way we were going to build out our transit system here in Leon County that actually had a more regional approach to it versus just being with the city. I understand the city controls the transit, but to have a good look at what that plan looked like and how far we progressed since the plan has been created will be something I'm interested in. I don't think we can continue to build roads until we're to a point that we feel sufficient enough that we have a good enough diverse way of transportation in Leon County and the surrounding area, in the CRTPA area. And if you think about just how expensive it is to own a car, the further you live from the urban core, the more important it becomes, and how many cars, how many people own specifically in Leon County. I was talking to Pam. She was saying about 90% of households have one or two cars, and 80% of those people who are coming in town are driving by themselves. And it's about $8,000 to $9,000 a year just to have a car, on top of the $320 to $230 that it costs to own a home. It just becomes unreasonable when it comes to being able to afford off of the median household income, which is about $67,000. So the great equalizer when it comes to these type of things is transit. I know the City of Tallahassee does all they can to try to provide the most efficient transit that they possibly can. But maybe we need to start looking at this as a regional thing, maybe from even an investment standpoint. I'm not willing to let us continue to go down this road without really taking a serious look on how we do transit and how we can make it more of a better system, not just for what happens here in Leon County, but what happens in the whole CRTPA region. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Along those lines, we had a good presentation the other day at the Regional Planning Council from Northwest Commuter Services. Is that right? And Chris can give you a brief detail of what the program is, but it's Nick's kind of along the lines of what you were talking about.
It's good timing, actually, because I actually brought some pens to pass around from what used to be Commuter Services in North Florida is now Ride On, which is basically a transportation commuter van pooling, carpooling program that many of you may be aware of, but at least on some of our rural counties may not be aware of this program because it was originally at FSU, and now it's housed at the Appalachian Regional Planning Council, and we're partnering with Emerald Coast Regional Council. So the entire District 3 region will now have one consistent program. And just not to go into the weeds on this, but essentially if you're a commuter and you're trying to save costs for transportation, you can sign up, use the software, and it will match you with another commuter, and you can either enter into a van pooling program or you can just carpool together. So there's lots of options. We're going to be doing a lot more outreach on this program, but it's a great economic development tool, especially with a workforce that's right now unemployment so high. You're competing to get people to take advantage of these programs is going to be vital to move
And the
forward.
employer can contribute to this also.
It's free. Yeah, the employers, we're looking at some of the larger employers in the region going out and doing some outreach to them so that they can offer this service to their employees, because you're looking at saving anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 annually in transportation costs if you use the
I
program.
think the good example that she gave was, I think it was Jefferson County. They had like 5 people that worked at the same place, and they found it cheaper to rent a van and split the costs. And
There's lots. It's multimodal. You can do the van. You can do a car. There's lots of different opportunities to save money and to help commuters get to work.
okay, thank you. Diane?
Along the lines with what Commissioner Richardson was saying about go back to Orange Avenue, and with what Commissioner Maddox was saying, there's going to be a super stop. You all have heard it's going to be built right there off Orange Avenue and Meridian. The widening of Orange Avenue and the development of that super stop is I don't know if we've looked at that, but they need to happen kind of together, because there will be increased traffic, pedestrian traffic, and other types of traffic to get to that super stop to be able to have transit into town or other places. So I'm hoping that somebody has already taken a look at those timelines to make sure that that's occurring, because since I've been on this committee, Commissioner Richardson raises the issue about what the widening of Orange Avenue every time, and every time we're hearing that it's in the plans, but it's 20 years down the road. Well, the super stop is not 20 years down the road. There's a temporary park there right now that Blueprint has put there, and it's temporary. Then it's going to go away when that super stop happens. So we really need to take a look at that. And I, too, live on the south side, and I do see a lot of pedestrian crossings on Orange Avenue at inappropriate places. Now, one of the things that has happened, I live near the roundabout, and I almost get hit daily trying to come out of my street because I can't see what's coming off of that roundabout, because they're coming through there pretty quick, and I'm trying to get out. I'm in the street trying to see what's coming, and sometimes you just take your life in your own hands, or you go up a block to get out so you can see better. So there's an issue there, but there now has been added so that kids can get across the street to get to Rickards back and forth. There's now been some safety measures put there to try to help with that. But in talking with Wayne Tedder, and some conversations we've had here as well, to help with that, yellow is now becoming a color that people ignore. Red is more of a color that people understand that means stop. So I hope that we will begin to look at maybe transitioning thoughts into looking at, for crosswalks, especially those that are heavy in pedestrian traffic, to put up red, because as you've heard, we're losing lives crossing streets. People are taking their lives in their own hands. People are not paying attention. We're distracted. And so I'm hoping that as we look at these mobility plans, we're looking at other projects that are taking place. Orange Avenue, I will continue to join Commissioner Richardson in this. Orange Avenue, if it's going to be the expressway, which that is what it is, from east to west and west to east, we've got to do something about making sure that all of it is widened so that we can protect pedestrians. In that area just on the other side of Spring Hill Road, where these kids are running back and forth across to the store, we had senior citizens in here, and I think Commissioner Richardson mentioned this last time, and they were telling us about this, and according to them, someone was killed there some years ago. And who wants to be responsible for a child losing their life because they took a chance and the driver had no option or didn't even see them? So I hope that we can, since this plan is flexible, that's what we said, right?
Sure is.
That we can look at moving Orange Avenue up on the priority list, because there's a great need as we continue to develop along Orange Avenue to make this happen. So I just want to offer that, speak up for my side of town, since our chair made sure that Wakulla gets into every conversation. So I want to speak up for Orange Avenue.
Thank you, Commissioner.
All right, Kristen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just building on a couple of comments, Commissioner, you just mentioned the red lights versus yellow lights at crosswalks. I think it was just the last meeting, we talked about that at the end. There was some discussion in the legislature about that. And Greg, I thought you all were going to look at whether or not red lights were possible and how we could use the hawk walks or other crosswalks. So is that still something you're looking into? Could we look at that as an agenda item, or where are we at with that?
It is in a couple of proposed bills out there. The way it stands right now, the ones you're referring to are rectangular flashing beacons. By basically standards aren't allowed to be red. Part of the bill makes that change, but there's a process that it has to go through with Federal Highway for that to happen. I think that's kind of uncharted territory when you get the legislature trying to mandate stuff that's against national standards, things like that. It is part of the bill. I don't know that the bill's had a lot of movement lately. This is one that we did talk about last month where they were mandating traffic signals at all mid-block crossings, and the bigger concern that we had was the way the bill is written is if they don't have that, you basically have to start taking them out by 2024, and that's actually a less safe situation. So far, the bill hasn't moved anywhere, but there has been some discussions about that particular issue.
I can agree with your concerns about that, and we've certainly seen the increased attention given the death we saw and an accident just a week later over at FSU recently, but that's not the only area of town that we see those problems. I think focusing on pedestrian and anything we can do city, county, with our university partners particularly, but in the neighborhoods, that would be a very good thing regardless of where this lands. But I would hope that we can get some movement on that, understanding it might be a longer process. Orange Avenue, just picking up on that conversation, Autumn from Blueprint gave a presentation to the Innovation Park Board last week, and I think she had a breakdown of the phasing for the airport gateway, all the different projects. So do you anticipate that update coming to us soon? It sounded like she was really deferential to CRTPA when it came to Orange Avenue. So we will see that coming back?
Yes, ma'am, and there's kind of two pieces to that. I think, and I'll ask Autumn to correct me if I'm wrong, but Blueprint actually has two pieces of Orange Avenue, the section from Spring Hill back to the west. I believe that's part of a regional mobility plan, and then the section that's part of the airport gateway, which is from South Lake Bradford to the new FSU road. DOT is currently working on the PD&E for Orange Avenue. As I mentioned before, they have funded design. I don't know yet if we know how all that's going to come together. I think we probably need a bit more time on that. But there are a couple of disjointed pieces in that. The fact that I believe the IA has given priority funding to the section from South Lake Bradford to the FSU road that hasn't yet addressed the piece from Spring Hill back to the east. So that'll be, again, working through our priority process as well.
I think we need more from Blueprint because I don't want to speak out of turn, but my memory was that we had prioritized as a Blueprint board, Spring Hill and some other things that we were focused on with Blueprint dollars.
Right.
She did mention advanced funding, some work on Orange Avenue west of Lake Bradford if Blueprint got ahead of FDOT funding. But it just made it sound like to me, because yes, sir, you have been bringing it up for a while, and you're right, we need a lot of attention there, but it sounded like there was some movement, and I think having design funded by FDOT is a very good, we've never been at this point before, so it's been a long time coming, but
Autumn, do you feel
stood
compelled
out.
to speak?
Oh, I did not mean to put Autumn on the, did I quote you all right at least?
Yeah. Come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
I did not mean to put you on the spot, Autumn. I should have known you were in the audience. Forgive me.
Talking about her like she wasn't even sitting out there.
It's behind the podium. I didn't see. So thank you. And it was a good update at Innovation Park Board. So I hope I got most of that right.
Yeah. The Airport Gateway project is to be implemented in phases. The first phase includes Stuckey Avenue, the new road through the Southwest Campus, and where it ties into Orange Avenue, and the Spring Hill Road improvement. So that maintains a connection between the airport and downtown at all times. So the piece for the new road, where it ties into Orange Avenue, we do want to advance the construction of that intersection because it needs to tie into Orange Avenue somehow. So we're working with DOT to try to secure DOT funds, which are not guaranteed for that improvement, and it may be through a reimbursement to get those funds to pay for that. But we do need to get that intersection where the new road meets Orange Avenue
and that probably would happen well in advance of the state's project to widen Orange Avenue. Yeah. Another intersection that would be included in that because of the Spring Hill Road improvements would be that same Orange Avenue and Spring Hill Road intersection as well. So we're trying to get those moved forward faster with potential reimbursement from the state for some of that work.
Thank you.
Thanks, Autumn. Yes, always has the answers, even on the fly there.
She's good.
Mr. Chair, I actually turned the card up when Commissioner Maddox was speaking. We just whipped around 3 good issues on ped safety, Orange Avenue, but back to the transit. This is one that I would really look to my City of Tallahassee colleagues on how best to wrap our minds around the city bus system and how it works with our prioritization and making sure that we are in line with your plans going forward. I will say there's been discussion, I know at this table and other bodies, about accessing public facilities that are in the unincorporated area. I often cite the East Side Library on Pedrick, which is just outside of the bus routes. We've looked at that in the past, but I think to Commissioner Maddox's good points, and what really stands out to me in discussions with Dr. Hall and some others is that if we're looking at affordable housing, workforce housing, there are areas of town that even if we had housing built, it may be cost prohibitive because you can't get out of that area of town without a car, that it compounds the cost of living in certain areas of our community when we don't have transit. And looking at a diversity of housing throughout City of Tallahassee and the county, and this would be similar to our other counties, we need to make sure that people have access and can afford to live in those different parts, and transit could be a piece of that. So in my mind, being able to support the city's efforts in building out the bus system, new projects coming on, I just wonder if there's any information that we could get from Star Metro or regional partners that would help us be more strategic. And the evaluation criteria and others, it seems like there's a lot of good pieces within that could help us vet these things. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know enough about the city's plans to see what opportunities, how we could best support that or not. So just wondering if that can fold into our conversation in the future as we get into transit.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, if you remember back in November, you all approved our participation along with Star Metro in the development of a comprehensive operations plan. So that'll, I think, kind of be that first step to establish, the services and the effectiveness of the service that Star Metro is doing now. They'll also be doing a transit development plan, I believe, in the next year or so. Andrea, correct? Yeah, it's due in 2021. Okay, so that'll be another component to, I think, address these very issues that we're talking about.
And that operation plan would come back to CRTPA to fold into our evaluation process as well as the city?
I think that's probably going to be done after we're finished up with it, but I think we could still probably incorporate components of that in as part of the regional mobility plan.
Okay, thank you.
Curtis?
I think Commissioner Matlow.
Jeremy, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to touch on both of those points. I agree. I think we need a more regional plan for transit, especially as we grow and we try to bring people from the counties and alternative counties into the city. It seems like we still continue to widen lanes and build new roads without really having a plan of what transit looks like 30 years from now. As what we do is we continue to grow, we develop, we add more lanes, we develop, we add more lanes, and we're going to be in the same position we are now without looking really long term about what transit means for our whole region. I think we're doing good things with pedestrian and bike facilities, which are great, that can also influence those decisions. But until we really get serious that transit's the future for our whole area, I don't think Star Metro can take the lead entirely. I think this board and other boards that we may share on should look at the whole region and say transit's a priority and really push it that way. And on priorities, I agree with Commissioner Richardson. I think, for me, Orange Avenue is one of my top priorities, as well as Tharp Street. We look at different roads we're doing, and there's children on that road. There's a school right there, and it's a very dangerous place to cross. there's not bike facilities, there's not pedestrian facilities, and the traffic is bumper to bumper. It's a very dangerous situation, and it's dangerous now. It's not dangerous 20 years from now. We need to figure out how to get, for me, I would like that to be at the top of the list. So my question would be, Mr. Slade, what would be the next step to move Orange Avenue up the priority list to get it done sooner?
Well, I think we would address that as part of our annual process. You know, if you, in June, if you all choose to move that to the top of the list. But again, as I said, you know, you need to make sure we're all aware of the fact that where it's in its development process. You know, it's still got to go through, finish up the PD&E, it's still got to go through design, it's still got to go through right-of-way acquisition. So it's not like if you move it suddenly to the top of the list, in 2 or 3 years it's going to be done. It's still, and especially with Orange Avenue, that's going to be an incredibly expensive project. I mean, we're probably, especially when you deal with the right-of-way acquisition and things like that, you're probably talking $15 to $20 million a mile to develop that project. So
right.
We can move it up, but I'll be honest with you, I don't think it's going to expedite the completion of the project much more than where it is now, simply because it's got more hoops to go through and steps to go through versus Crawfordville, versus Woodville, versus Capitol Circle. It's just that far behind in the development process.
Okay. I thank you for that answer. And I just think, again, you know, collectively we have to look at where we want to invest and how. And I think oftentimes we see ourselves investing into new roadways that will allow for new development when we have serious issues in our city that have been issues for a long time that need the attention that they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Curtis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, we talk about how far behind Orange Avenue. I've mentioned this here before. 20 years ago, when I bought property to build my house on Orange Avenue, there was a developer that wanted to develop the green spaces between Wanish Way and Pasco 20 years ago. Well, we fought that. The city purchased that property then and told us 20 years ago that Orange Avenue would be widened through that segment. 20 years later, now we're talking about another maybe 5, maybe 10 years. But I'm telling you, the development that has happened on East Orange Avenue has invited more traffic. Like I said, I don't have the statistical data to prove it, but I can tell you what I observe weekdays and weekends. Orange Avenue, that segment from, well, I guess you could say from Capitol Circle Southwest all the way through to South Monroe, South Adams, it's bumper to bumper. When the traffic stops at Orange Avenue and Pasco, it backs all the way up across that bridge almost to Spring Hill Road whenever that traffic light is red. I'm telling you. And so I'm disappointed now. And then now the airport gateway is in the conversation, and we're talking about what we're going to do there. And I'm telling you, I will not support any of that if it is made a priority over this segment of Orange Avenue, because we have been told this for years now, that Orange Avenue would be widened, and the traffic has gotten even worse, and the lives of our children. Those kids that cross Orange Avenue to go to NIMS Middle School, they don't cross at the traffic light. They cross all along there. The kids at Liberty Park, Commissioner Williams-Cox, those kids don't cross at the traffic light because there is no traffic light. And that's the other issue I'm going to bring up later, is where are we with those crosswalks at Liberty Park? Because I would hate for a life to have to be taken in order for us to bring the kind of attention to what we have been talking about there that we're now getting at FSU when an FSU student. And I pray for the family. I sympathize with their loss, but we don't want that to have to happen somewhere else before we bring that kind of attention to what we have been told for almost 20 years now. And so I just will not stand for that segment of Orange Avenue to be somehow put lower on the priority list, or Greg, even to be told, well, it's got to jump through these hoops. Well, let's expedite that if we have to make it happen. So that's my position, and that's what I'm going to continue to advocate for as a member of this board. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Diane?
I want to concur that, I hear what you're saying, Greg, but if we don't ever get started, the cost is just going to become paramount.
Oh, I agree.
So at some point, we got to start it, because if we had started 20 years ago, we had the PD done, it would be outdated. It would be wide, and we'd probably be looking at more that needs to be done. But we got to start somewhere, and 20 years has been a long time, you know. Curtis had an afro 20 years ago. and advocate for Orange Avenue.
I got a picture to prove it,
He's lost the top. so we don't want to lose the bottom, because we're still, you get my point. But I put my card up to talk about the regional transportation. Having grown up in Gadsden County, regional transportation is not rocket science. Because for years, we've had people who own buses who brought people from Gadsden County to Leon County to work, or took them to Chattahoochee, which is to the hospital there, which is the largest employer in Gadsden County. But we relied on those private individuals to do that, and those folks have died off. And so people are having to do other things now to get to Tallahassee. My brother-in-law had to catch a van to get to CK Steel, to catch the bus, to get to the hospital to see his specialist. And he can't talk. He has a trach. So he can't talk, but he has to get to his specialist. So we really do need to embrace him from Wakulla County, from Jefferson County, from all points. People are coming here because this is where the jobs are. We've got to address this, and even if there's, and I'm glad we're looking at it, Chris, even if there has to be some type of incentive to get private businesses to do this again. I know there used to be buses, mini buses of people who scheduled, based on people's work schedule, to bring people here. Big Bend Transit used to bring them over for medical appointments, and I think that some of that is still happening, but not as frequently as it used to be. In the rural counties, you don't have specialists, and because of that, that's another health disparity, that we don't have the health care needed in the surrounding area, so they got to get here to get help. So I hope that we will, in the words of Commissioner Maddox, we get serious about trying to have some real regional transportation and not just piecemeal. I'm glad we're starting, but we're starting something that used to be a robust business for some people. That we just need to get back to that and get people in here so that they can get their needs met, and so we can help with a lot of ills that our society has for the lack of transportation or transit.
Mr. Chair, I'll be quick. Exciting to hear all the comments around the table about transit and the need to really get serious about it. I think CRTPA is the place that we need to be at to have that conversation about how we connect what's going on as far as transit is concerned in outlying counties to what's going on here in Leon County and City of Tallahassee. I think that's the role that the CRTPA plays. Now, I'm going to say it again. I think I want to make this very clear that it's going to cost money to make this happen. And I think if we want the most robust system that we can put together, it's going to take more than just the City of Tallahassee putting their money out to make it happen. And so you can't have this conversation without transit without also having a conversation about how we're going to pay for this robust system that we're trying to build. And I'm willing and ready to have that conversation and to start looking for those pots of money, whether it's wherever it is. I just want to have the conversation and be very frank and honest about the fact that no one municipality can handle the cost of what we're trying to build on its own. And I think that's the reason why those plans sit dormant, is because when it comes down to it, yeah, it sounds nice, but how are you going to pay for it? That's the conversation we got to have. How are we going to pay for it? Second thing is, Curtis has been advocating, again, ever since he sat on this board for Orange Avenue, but I think that he had to take that next step from advocating to action. Now, I understand what you're saying, Greg, about the fact that it does have to jump through a bunch of hoops, but I think the first hoop is us making it a top priority, us moving it up the ladder or the chain when it comes to our regional mobility plan. And so If that can be done today, let's go ahead and do it today. If it can't, then what kind of process do we have to go through to make it happen? I think we went through the same thing. I think it was like a few years back on Blairstone or something like that. It was a few years back that we had. I think Commissioner Dozier, you were really active in it. We had a road that we were really looking at that we wanted to move up the list. And it took a vote or some nature. But I want to know the process. But we went ahead and went through the process and voted up. It moved up in priority, and things got done pretty fast. But I think it might have been a little further along. Probably wasn't as expensive as Orange Avenue. But I think it makes a statement for us to go ahead and do it. Whether or not it's going to take as long as you say, or whether or not we're going to be able to expedite it, I think it makes a statement for us to go ahead and move it up in priority. And so, can we do that today? Or what's the process for us to do?
I'm not going to vote for it, putting it in front of Crawford Highway. I can tell you that right now.
I understand.
We've been waiting on that
protect,
for my lifetime.
Listen, you got to protect your own interests, but I got to protect mine too.
I understand.
I think the answer to your first question is, number one, that's a significant change to our priority list that we did not include as part of the agenda. I mean, we have our annual priority process that we go through in June. We can do it then. We could agenda it for next month, but I'll be honest with you, it's really not going to have an immediate impact.
I'll tell you what, so how about this? How about, if I can, or if you need a vote, I'm willing to do that too, that we give direction to bring it back for consideration for being moved up in June with a full analysis of what it means to move it up and what it would do to the timeline.
Yeah, and if there's a consensus, I don't believe you need a motion. We can do that as part of that process.
That would be my direction. If I need to vote, I will, but that would be my direction.
If I could go back real quick, and Commissioner Maddox, I'm glad you touched on the money part about the regional transportation. I mean, every one of those efforts I've ever been involved in, everybody's ready to go with it until you ask who's going to pay for it. And that's one of the drawbacks, especially in the transit world, is rural transportation is extremely underfunded at the federal level, at the state level. It always comes back to the local governments, whoever they may be, to carry the lion's share of that. So if it is something that you all want to pursue, we'll be happy to do that. But that's probably the first conversation that you have to have, is who's going to be willing to step up and pay for it.
On point to that, one last question, Mr. Chair. I got to believe that there's different funding structures to make it happen besides, especially when you're looking at it from a regional standpoint, than besides one municipality just having to front the whole thing.
Sure. Yeah.
Whether it's a board made up regionally of kind of like this that looks at, every municipality putting in a little bit or whatever may have you. Can we get? I mean, have you seen creative ways of funding it that way?
There's a couple of different ways. And when I said locally, I wasn't specifically mentioning a particular local government. I meant everybody.
Right.
The counties, the cities. You can go the route of a regional transit authority that has taxing ability. I'll be honest with you, I have not looked in that in many, many years. That is an option that's out there. But I'd have to go back and do some research on that. But no, when I said that, I meant in general. Yeah. Including all the local governments as part of that, as a funding partner, so to speak.
Right. When we get ready to have that conversation, if we can also look at those different funding structures and what it looks like in other places. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Curtis, Christian, and Jeremy are being mindful we're not even voting on anything. This is just a presentation.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would say, again, thank you, Commissioner Maddox, for raising that issue of cost, because I can tell you, I would be derelict as a city commissioner if I didn't tell you that Star Metro is not self-sustaining. Yeah. It has to be subsidized every year. So we're not going to be interested in expanding Star Metro unless there is a partnership and someone else helps us to assume the cost of doing that. So, we want to do it. I worked in Gadsden County for 20 years myself and did that commute every day. And I know what it cost me to do that commute because we didn't have the regional transportation available. But the city of Tallahassee cannot bear that burden by itself.
Don't blame it.
Nor should it.
Yeah. So when we have that conversation, I'm sure we'll be willing to be at the table, but understand that everybody's going to have skin in the game when it comes to the cost.
Kristen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had one comment on the Orange Avenue piece. This is exactly why, Commissioner Richardson, that I would like to better understand what you all are doing in the city, because we have choices to make at this board or others that, I don't know, getting creative on this. So I think that is appropriate. For the update in June, I like that posture that Commissioner Maddox was just talking about, inspired by another comment you made, Commissioner Richardson. In that item, since we know, Greg, that Orange Avenue is going to be of particular interest to this board, looking at the different funding streams coming into that project, because I heard you say, and I understand the concern, that you don't want anything to jump ahead of Orange Avenue, but it's my understanding a lot of the other things we talk about within the airport gateway is blueprint funding or others, and wouldn't negatively impact Orange Avenue funding. But I want to make sure I'm clear on that, if you hear what I'm saying,
Sure.
that
I believe so.
the prioritization on CRTPA can be parallel to what Blueprint's working on. And I guess the last comment there, I wonder if the work of Blueprint and having a more regional focus might help leverage some of those dollars or something. So just, filling out that conversation for June would be helpful.
Could it be a CIS road?
No, it's wholly contained within really Capital Circle. Typically, your CIS roads are ones that go through multiple counties, or at least 2 counties. It would be.
I thought they
virtually
got
impossible.
funding for the bus station to the airport. That's all within one.
No, the CIS facility is
No?
Capital Circle from I-10 down to the airport, because the airport's a CIS facility.
Sorry. Jeremy?
Sure. I think even before we get to, when we talk about transit, before we get to how we pay for it, the first step is just making it a priority, saying it's something we want to do. The second step would be coming up with a plan of what we're actually talking about. If that's bus-only lanes, if that's bus rapid transit, where we're trying to head. But I think it would be premature to talk about cost before it's really set as somewhere we're trying to get to. Like Orange Avenue, it had to be a priority and needs a plan, and then we figure out how we're going to pay for it. So I think when we look at our priorities in the future, if transit's where we want to go, we have to make that statement and say this is the future about where we're trying to get to. And then when we look at the cost of transit versus the cost of roads, and as Commissioner Richardson said, we know Star Metro doesn't make any money. It's a public good that we offer, but we also know roads don't make us any money either, and we have to maintain those in perpetuity. So looking at the cost balance of that going further out into the future, and just what we get back from the lack of congestion and a more accessible community, I think it matters, and that's why it should be a priority.
Just so everybody knows, Wakulla County is not interested in partnering with Tallahassee to set up a transit system. I like the commuter services idea. We got Big Bend Transit. We have it. So just so nobody has to clutter their minds with that thought.
Well, Mr. Chair,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
that's what you're thinking today.
Yeah.
But you're not going to be around forever. So we want to, let's say you may not be at this table forever.
Yeah,
I think we need to think futuristically, and we need to think about the trends and things that are happening as we're reducing our carbon footprint and reducing the number of cars on the road. We need to think about that when we start talking about transit. And I wanted to say to Commissioner Dozier and anyone else who is interested in what is happening with Star Metro, we're happy to provide whatever information is available. If it's not on our website, we're happy to provide that. We're happy to get the director to come and make a presentation about what Star Metro is planning, because what Star Metro is planning is what the city has provided for what our planning will be. So we're happy to share that information. It's not a secret. So we can use that. But I think we need to make sure that we're looking at the future and not just our needs right now, but futuristic needs.
I'm just, all due respect, I'm just trying to be realistic. People in Wakulla County have a slightly different mentality than the people who live in Tallahassee, and there's a lot of fierce independence and resistance to pay taxes.
I got you.
Just trying to be realistic.
And for those who are moving from Tallahassee to Wakulla, we'll just make sure they understand that.
And we'll welcome moving their tax dollars down to our county. We appreciate that.
I understand, Mr. Chair. People in Tallahassee have that same fierce independence.
Yeah, they do.
You're right.
This is more about, for me in particular, this is more about giving someone the ability to be able to live further away from town and commute in town, if that's what they choose to do. What I believe is that eventually the property that's closer to the urban core. So what we had some flight go on some years back, and it made the property closer to the urban core a little cheaper. But now when you get all of this urban infill, that property is going to become more expensive, and people are going to be forced to live further away from the urban core. And if they are, what I want to make sure is that they have what they need in order to get in town to the jobs, to the food, to whatever they need. And right now, I'm not sure regionally we have a system in place that can happen. And that could be like Commissioner William Cox said, it could be 15 years, 20 years, but I don't want to be caught with people saying that those services are in place and they're stuck in a place where they can't get to food, or they can't get to jobs, or they can't they can't move to a certain area because of that. So I get where you're coming from Wakulla, but eventually it's going to be a problem for everybody.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Let's move on. Thank you, everybody.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're hitting all the bases today, I think. You know, and I definitely been really, it's a very good discussion we have on regional transit, how it might be paid for, what direction we want to go into. One thing that we need to do, both the city commissioners and county commissioners for Leon County, is think about how the comp plan is affected by this. I mean, Commissioner Maddox, you talked about how people, when the urban core starts filling out, people want to move out. One thing that we want to do in the comp plan is look at the housing options that you know, millennials and other generations are going to want to have. So we can try to minimize that as much as possible per their preference. Sure. So it's all a balance between, we talk a lot about transit in the last 30 minutes, which is great, but we also need to think, at least especially here in Leon County and in the city of Tallahassee, about our comp plan amendments and how we can probably adapt to what current housing preferences are, as well as preferences in the next 10 or 20 years, so that we can mitigate the need for sprawl outside our urban core. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wrong board meeting, but I had to say that.
Now moving along.
Mr. Chairman, item 4A is our requesting approval of the recommendation of our audit solicitation and authorizing the chairman to sign the ultimate contract. Just to give you a background, in years past, we have actually piggybacked on the City of Tallahassee's audit contract. In the last few years, they have included local preference in part of their selection criteria. As I've mentioned before, with federal funds, we're not allowed to do that, so we separated ourselves out. We had a selection committee that's comprised of 2 staff members from the city's financial services department, as well as the city auditor, that reviewed and scored the 4 submittals, and James Moore was the successful proposer, I guess. So we're requesting again approval of that recommendation and authorization to.
We got a speaker, Wayne Durant.
There's a motion for approval.
Well, we got a speaker.
Got a speaker.
Got a speaker?
Yeah.
Unless are you with the firm?
Yes, sir.
Are you going to try to talk us out of it?
I was just going to
You want to
do first? We'll talk about it.
Cut your losses.
Dr. V's motion, but thank you, sir. Go right.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to briefly introduce myself. I'm Wayne Durrett with James Moore & Company CPAs. I'm an audit manager here in our Tallahassee office, and just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to provide service to your agency. And I look forward to get to work and build a great relationship with everyone.
Good presentation. Is Mark Payne still up there?
Yes, sir.
Went to high school with him. Good fellow. He's one of your partners, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We got a motion to second. Any more discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next item. Good job.
Item 6D.
I'll tell Mark you did a good job.
Is the kickoff of our Thomasville Road Trail feasibility study. Jack's going to manage that project for us. I want to turn it over to him for the presentation.
This is going to be a short presentation.
Excellent. Betsy has to go. Betsy has to leave.
The answer is no. No. Just quickly, this project came out of the Bike and Pedestrian Plan. We at the CRTPA had funded this project through our own means and have done this through the general planning contract that we've got with Kimley Horn. And I'll turn it over to Kate before I give away too much of her quick presentation.
Very quick. Back up again. So we'll start here. So the project intent, as Jack mentioned, this was the highest rated prioritized project from the Tallahassee-Leon County Bike Ped Master Plan was Thomasville Road. what this project's going to do is it's really going to look at a technical review of whether or not we understand, we're confident that a trail can be placed along Thomasville Road, but we want to make sure that it is feasible and reasonable when it comes to safety, when it comes to our natural and built environment, as well as when it comes to costs. This is a very important network connection. There are thousands of residents that live within neighborhoods that directly connect to Thomasville Road, and it provides a major north-south connection within our community. And then we have Midtown to Market underneath that, because ultimately this project would connect the Midtown area up to the Market Square area, both two major destinations within Tallahassee, and it would just be great for transportation as well as recreation within our area. So this is the project schedule. Those items in green are things that we have already done and we are doing right at the moment. Our next steps are going to be a site visit tomorrow, so if you see us along Thomasville Road, honk and wave, because we'll be out there most of the day just collecting a bunch of on-ground data. We're also going to have a kickoff meeting with the committee meetings in March, and then we're also going to meet with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan Working Group in March as well. As you can note, there's limited stakeholder and public involvement in this process because we're really looking at the feasibility, and if there's any public involvement, it will come in the next steps after. But have confidence that this project did come from the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan project that had a ton of engagement around Leon County, as well as the Midtown Area Transportation Plan, which many people were supportive of multimodal facilities within this area. And with that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Kristen?
Really quick, I know.
Fantastic presentation.
Thanks.
I'm glad we're moving forward. This has been a question I've gotten a lot. I have no other questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you. But thank you.
Somebody write this one down. Okay, moving along.
It's in the minutes.
I serve on multiple boards with Kristen. She's the chief question asker.
Is that a bad thing?
Everyone is shocked.
Is that a bad thing?
Thank
No,
you,
no.
Commissioner
Okay,
Mine.
just want to make sure.
No,
Want to make sure that wasn't a bad thing.
No. Makes
Questions
the
are good.
Meeting's exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Voted you to be chair.
No, they did.
Any action on this item?
Except
You
for
need action
Brightler DOT report. No.
Just for
No,
information?
okay.
Okay.
The department doesn't have any updates for this meeting.
Excellent.
Can I make a comment about Florida Department of Transportation and ask that I think I've emailed you about a roundabout at I-10 and 90 where the FedEx distribution center is coming out. It is a mess at the rush hour, and they're having to post officers there in the mornings and in the evenings, and people cannot get out of that Summit East. And so something needs to be done. I would prefer to see a roundabout in that area instead of a traffic light.
I know you copied me on an email to Jason Peters, but I have not heard anything back from Jason, so I'll follow up with him.
Okay, all right. It's really bad.
Mr. Chairman, I just have one item under my report. Just want to let you all know we participated in a meeting last week with staff from FDOT, FSU, as well as the city, and trying to start to look at some things along Tennessee in light of the tragedy that took place a couple of weeks ago. One of the things, going back to Commissioner Miner's comments about the safety improvement or the safety performance measures, one of the things that we're trying to do, kind of coming out of that, is reinvigorate what's called the Community Traffic Safety Team. And that's a group made up of typically MPO employees, city and county, public works agencies, law enforcement, to try to address some of these issues, before they come up, hopefully. But we're hoping to get that kind of reconstituted the next couple of months, and we think that'll go, hopefully, a long way in addressing some of these, both short and long-term safety issues.
I'm on the Wakulla Community Traffic Safety Team. It is a great place to get the sheriff's department with the road department.
Yes, DOT.
I'm the only elected person on there, so it's not a political board, and it's a great way. In fact, at our meeting today, the Safe Route to School director was asking if Leon County even had a CTS team. He said he hadn't heard from them in years.
Yeah, it's been inactive. The program is managed out of DOT, and the gentleman who's responsible for that, Andy, I'm blanking on his last name, was at the meeting with FSU and everyone last week. So we're going to take the next couple of months and try to get that going again.
It's a valuable committee.
See if we can't get some good out of that.
Jefferson did one also, and we also did a list of our needs. And I looked at it just the other day, and our list is whittled down significantly since we put that together.
It's another good place to hem DOT up, too, at a meeting.
Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Were you finished your report?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I wanted to mention, from your report, I heard you say that it was you, FDOT, FSU, we need FAMU, we need TCC, and we need Leon County Schools all to be a part of anywhere where kids are crossing streets. We need to have everybody at the table to talk about safety measures. 100 years ago, I worked in the safety office. DOT safety office, as a matter of fact. And those were the kinds of issues that we look at, not just crash data, but pedestrian data. And so we need to have everybody at the table for future meetings so that we're not lagging behind and we're inclusive of everyone.
And I didn't mean
also, the school bus garage plays an important part, too.
I know the school board is usually a part of that group as well. I just honestly forgot to mention them. But typically, law enforcement, schools, your local agencies that deal with safety in general are usually all part of that group.
Okay.
Okay. Sue Ellen, we had public discussion at the beginning. I knew you weren't here, but I'll let you, for future reference, try to come in the meeting start.
Okay, thank you for that. I would say that it might be a good idea to try and move that down, being that we don't have the garage is full, and we don't have places to park. I know you all sometimes can park down here.
If parking is an issue, contact my office, and we'll get you parking here in the building.
Okay, that'd be wonderful. Thank you. Because I had to park way down the street and then jog.
It took me years to get one of those passes. Feel lucky. I had to park across the road, too.
And so that's why I do appreciate allowing me
Just
to
let me know in advance.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Excuse me, ma'am. Would you state your name and address for the record?
Sue Ellen Gardner. I live here in Tallahassee. The area code, zip code is 32305. On the January 21st meeting minutes, the public comment section stated that I, Sue Ellen Gardner, requested the board to take no action regarding the Woodville Highway project until the board hears from the citizens of the South Side at a community-organized town hall meeting, as the people of this area emphatically do not want this super roundabout plan to happen. And again, this is regarding the road construction on Woodville Highway. The meeting minutes failed to state that the board declined to meet with the people and attend this community-organized meeting. This board also rejected the idea of sending representatives on your behalf, which is why no additional information was given. I want the full picture to be painted and it to be clear that this board has, regardless of the concerns of the citizens in this area, has chosen to ignore and disregard our discontentment for the super roundabout project and move forward as if there wasn't a petition signed by 400 citizens, as if members of the Southside community has not showed up to these meetings and voiced our objections. Please fully document so that the records are accurate and complete in the January 21st meeting minutes and the subsequent minutes for this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Greg?
Yes.
Anybody? We're adjourned.
Mr. Chair, I've got one thing. I've said something, thank you, Mr. Chair. I've said this before, I'll say it again. We need to be very careful that we don't give the impression here that we aren't entertaining questions from either people at this table or in the audience, or that we project a flippant attitude. I mean, we're talking about millions of dollars here, and the projects that we talk about and discuss and move forward on can save lives. So I just want to make sure, Commissioner Dozier, you don't need anyone to stick up for you. You have the capability of doing it on your own, but I had to say that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we're adjourned now.
Thank you.